So welcome back to Stu Structures. We are here for another glimpse of down in the boneyards. You know, in some of the previous videos, I've shown some of the diesels and the various things that are down here in the yards, but, you know, we're going to take another look at that today. Diesels, antique diesels, old diesels, you know, 40, 50, 60-year-old diesels. You know, the E8 that are going to restore that I did the last video on was, you know, 1950-ish, so we're talking 70 years there. So, you know, in town here in Belington, the Durbin and Greenbrier, who operates this railroad for the state of West Virginia, who owns the right-of-way, they originally were going to do a museum in Elkins, West Virginia, which I have mentioned before, and they have the turntable steel sitting down here on a flat car, and the state did some type of a financial study and just determined it wasn't worth the investment to rebuild the roundhouse to put this collection in. But the Durbin and Greenbrier has been steadily collecting old diesels. Now, they do restore a lot of them and use them on their line here because they do quite a few freight movements through the week, and they do passenger excursions on the weekends. And, you know, they've got a lot of railroad tied together all over the state with various small railroads now. Over at Durbin, where the home for this railroad originally was, they have a small climax over there. And yeah, it's a nice little engine, and they take excursions on it down the river a good ways to where they have a couple of cabooses that you can rent and spend a weekend or something in if you'd like to. And they also operate Cass Scenic Railroad, which a lot of you are familiar with, but for those of you that aren't, they have several Shay locomotives over there, and they take long excursions. You can take a short part of that, which goes to Bald Knob, which is extremely high, but they also go on from there to the second highest, or Whitaker Station, the first one, I'm sorry, and then it goes on to Bald Knob, which is the second highest point in West Virginia, and that's an all-day excursion. The Whitaker Trail, or the Whitaker trip on its own, excuse me, is a nice trip in its own. But they have reconnected all the track between Durbin and Cass that was washed out in 1985. And they had rebuilt an F unit here in Belington and labeled it for the C&O, which owned that trackage long, you know, years and years and years ago. So it's my understanding they're going to move this F unit over there and run excursions between Durbin and Cass. I'm not sure when that'll happen or really what the story is. Maybe I'll do some more interviews with some of the railroad people, and maybe I can post some of that information in the upcoming future. But today, really what we want to do is just look at all the collection of diesels that they have down here in the yard. There's just tons and tons of old diesels. You know, a lot of them need to be restored. There's quite a few F units and you know, BL2 and some GP units that you know, are operational. And they swap a lot of them out and do work on them constantly, so they're not running the same thing all the time. But anyway, we're going to take a glimpse at all these units sitting down here and give you an idea of what's sitting down here in the yard. Now, to begin with, I am no diesel expert. My favorite time period really is steam, and I know a lot more, especially about B&O steam, than I do anything else. So I'm just going to go through several slides of all these various diesels that they have sitting down here. I mean, F units, GP units, a lot of them are obvious, although I don't know if it's a B, C, D, or, you know, what changes have been made to them since they were originally built, so I'm not sure what version of these, you know, are out there. This first two here is just the consist that they're constantly using right at the moment to move a lot of freight, and you know, normally they pair up a lot of F units to run their passenger excursions on weekends, but they do a lot of freight movements through the week. And you know, it's what's sitting out here to begin with are the units that they're mainly using for their excursions. This F unit here is part of that. It consists on the weekends, along with the F unit on the right that we saw previously. But you know,
they do quite a bit of freight movements through the week. The C&O unit here was rebuilt and labeled as C&O because the line between Durbin and Cass Scenic Railroad, which was originally C&O trackage up into the West Virginia coal fields, and timber, has been restored since the flood of '85 wiped it out. So it's my belief that they're going to take this C&O unit over there to run trains and excursions on the track that was originally C&O over there. And that's the other reason why a lot of these units are labeled in B&O and Western Maryland, because this in Belington was the union of the two railroads. So they're painting a lot of the diesels back to those two railroads. This Elk Creek Railroad, you're going to see several units here that belong to them. This belonged to an individual short line railroad down in central West Virginia. And it was mainly just used for coal, and they brought the coal out to another line, which eventually the A&O, the Allegheny and Ohio, took over from CSX so that line wouldn't be abandoned in West Virginia. And then the A&O moves all that up into Grafton, West Virginia, where the CSX takes over and moves it on east. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the coal mines were owned, and most of that coal goes to Ukraine, if my brain is serving me correctly. But a lot of these other units, the last couple and these coming up here, are sitting down in behind the shop. This BL2 unit was used for quite a while in passenger and freight service here in the area, and it's constantly down in behind the shop. So I'm assuming this is something that they are just doing light maintenance on over a period of time. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. And this small switcher, they used this to move stuff around for a very short period of time, and now it's sitting back here. I'm assuming since this stuff is all on the tracks down in behind here, this is the stuff most likely to be repaired and put back out onto the tracks. 6641 was used quite a bit here, and now it's obviously in for repairs behind the shops as well. And just a lot of nice old paint schemes on antique diesels. This C&O unit, the green one to the right here in this shot, and the upcoming couple of shots here, by the time it was painted green like this, it obviously was in maintenance away service on the C&O. And I'm not sure the heritage of most all of this. I mean, a lot of the units were C&O and B&O, and the Western Maryland units that are painted, I'm not sure about. I've been trying to get in touch with somebody from the railroad, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of people that have the knowledge of all of the heritage of these units, what railroads owned them over a long period of time since they were originally built. So, hopefully I can come up with that and give you more detail on that in a future video. We'll see where we go with that. There's one other track that they use for a storage track, basically. And this is where a lot of the diesels are setting that they're not currently in use or planning on being built immediately. And there's just, there's RS units, there's different switchers, there's FA units, there's just all kinds of stuff sitting in here. This FA they were originally going to use as a control unit for a train, and they rebuilt part of the front end, and it just ceased on that. I'm not sure what the story was behind that. But you can see a lot of these engines really are in really good shape compared to some of the others. And some of these are newer acquisitions. Some of these have been sitting here for quite a few years on the tracks down here. And it really is a nice collection. I hope that one of these days they can get the roundhouse or something together for a museum to open it up to the public so people can come and see and take pictures of. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the modeling community, like to have real life examples to look at, to take pictures of, so they can model diesels the way they were, down to the rivets, and a lot of this is good for that type of thing, but you know, there's a lot of nostalgia in this for people that worked on the railroads over the years and ran these diesels or worked on the trains they pulled. You know, it brings back memories to a whole lot of people, and once those people are gone, all that information is lost without these as a backup to kind of instill those memories in other people. I mean, today's diesels have came a long way, and you know, a lot of these early examples, there's quite a few of them around the country, but they're slowly disappearing. And the more of these that can be saved as those others disappear, the better off history will be remembered as far as the early diesels and the railroads of the United States. So I'm glad I live here in this area and have access to take pictures of all these diesels and, you know, various things and share them with all of you out there. It, you know, it really is quite a sight to see walking around the yards down here. You know, I'm glad I live here, and, you know, I do own a little bit of stock in the railroad, so I kind of make myself at home when I'm down here. They don't like a whole lot of people just wandering around loose in the yards. They do have this one steam locomotive setting here, which would have to be built, you know, everything scratch from the frame up. It's just the boiler failed their inspections, and just, you know, it's no longer of use, unfortunately. There was a sister to this locomotive that is being rebuilt, that the boiler survived its inspection, and they had to build a whole new tender for it. And you know, I think one of the drive axles and gears was messed up. There's several things on this that they had to sub out over the years and rebuild, but this will be a nice one to, you know, for a static display at some point. The other locomotive that they have just finished repainting is this Western Maryland. They've never had one here locally painted in this paint scheme. And it's nice to see this come along and be painted in this paint scheme. This is a GP8, and you know, it was never originally in the Western Maryland paint scheme, but this is one paint scheme that they've never had representative here in the Belington yard. And this station was half Western Maryland, half B&O. This is a union station where they met. So most of the locomotives they repaint into these two paint schemes. And anyway, the light isn't the best on this, but I had the opportunity this afternoon to go down and do this, so I just wanted to throw this into the end of the video and give you all an update on this specific locomotive. I like this paint scheme. I'm not a big West Virginia, Maryland fan, but I do like this paint scheme, and I think this is a nice representation of the colors and the paint as they were in this version of the diesel area. So there you have a short, sweet video on the diesels down here in the Belington Boneyards. The Western Maryland unit that they just painted is a very nice unit. I'm glad they did that. Belington was the union station of the Western Maryland and the B&O railroads. So the two of those both operated in and out of Belington, West Virginia. So most of the diesels, even though they're all in different paint schemes, the ones that they use on this line for actual operations, they do tend to paint in either B&O or Western Maryland colors, even though that was not the original heritage of the locomotive in question. But it's a nice looking paint scheme. I'm glad they did that. That was one that has not been represented on the B&O railroad here, and you know, I'm glad they did it. They've had a couple of Western Maryland units painted in the fireball, the black with the fireball, but this is the first time they've done this paint scheme, so it's nice to see. So in any case, I'm starting to work on structures. I hope next week to have a continuance of the Riverside shops that I started last winter. Summer just got so hectic. It's been a while since I've posted anything. So if you're coming back and joining me, thank you. And I hope to get on a week-by-week basis again through the winter. Next year is going to be cramped again, so I may have to take the summer off again. But we'll see if I can get back to a week-by-week schedule here through the winter for getting structures built and a few other odd things I throw in here and there. So anyway, once again, thanks for coming back and sharing this time with me. I do appreciate it and look forward to spending the winter with you. Happy trains.